13 months after our first WGN Investigates report on questionable spending by South Suburban politician Tiffany Henyard, it appears she has been forced off the ballot.
Thornton Township Supervisor Tiffany Henyard, who was appointed to that position tonight, lost her bid for the Democratic Party's nomination in this rarely used
controversial politician Tiffany Henyard, known for her flamboyant personality and self-proclaimed title of super mayor, is fiercely fighting to retain her grip on power in Thornton Township and Dolton, Illinois. Recently, she was excluded from the Democratic ballot for Township Supervisor, triggering a whirlwind of allegations including election tampering, voter suppression, and corruption. Lawsuits and accusations are flying, creating a firestorm of political drama. Supporters argue she's a leader battling for justice, while critics view it as a desperate bid to cling to power amidst mounting opposition. The scandal has left the township deeply divided, raising questions about Henyard's future and the integrity of the local political landscape.
Controversy. 7 minutes, that's all it took for Tiffany Henyard to be out as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor, and she left here visibly upset.
Senator and Thornton Township Democratic Committeeman Napoleon Harris made a decision that upended local politics and sparked unprecedented drama. For the first time in over 3 decades, Harris opted for a caucus instead of a primary election to decide which candidates would appear on the ballot, a move widely perceived as a strategic effort to block Tiffany Henyard's path to nomination. Critics and supporters speculated that the decision was carefully orchestrated to tilt the scales against Henyard, a suspicion seemingly validated when her name was absent from the Democratic ballot for the upcoming election. The primary reason for Henyard's disqualification was her slate's failure to include a certified assessor, a technicality that Harris used to dismiss her candidacy outright. Capitalizing on this oversight, Harris and his slate of candidates dominated the caucus, securing the Democratic nomination for the April election. The outcome marked a major setback for Henyard and ignited intense debates within the community over the fairness and integrity of the process. Opinions on Harris's actions were sharply divided. Some viewed his decision as a legitimate use of procedural tools to uphold candidacy standards and restore credibility to local governance. Others condemned it as a calculated power grab aimed at marginalizing Henyard and consolidating his own influence. The fallout extended far beyond the caucus hall, polarizing residents and party members alike. Henyard and her supporters argue that Harris's decision was a blatant attempt to undermine her leadership and derail her ambitions, framing it as political sabotage. Meanwhile, Harris and his allies maintained that the caucus adhered to Democratic Party rules and was necessary to ensure order and accountability in local politics. This contentious episode has not only reshaped the electoral landscape, but also intensified existing divisions within the community. With emotions running high, the debate over Harris's motivations and the broader implications for local democracy continues. As accusations of corruption and power plays fly, questions about the balance of power, accountability, and the future of Thornton Township politics loom large, leaving the community grappling with issues of trust and governance.
Tiffany
Henyard's response to her disqualification from the Thornton Township Democratic Caucus was nothing short of explosive, escalating an already contentious political saga into a full-blown showdown. The tension reached a boiling point when Henyard, visibly furious, stormed out of the caucus meeting, her sharp accusations reverberating through the room. She charged State Senator and Committeeman Napoleon Harris and his allies with orchestrating what she described as a coup to sabotage her political career. Her fiery outburst, punctuated by claims of election rigging at its finest, lambasted the caucus process as not only illegal, but a blatant effort to undermine her leadership and silence her supporters. Henyard did not mince words, calling the caucus a farce, designed to eliminate her from the race and suppress the will of the people she represents. She painted Harris's actions as calculated and undemocratic, accusing him of executing a power grab that mocked the principles of fair elections. Her allegations struck a chord with her loyal base, who viewed her exclusion as a glaring injustice. For her supporters, this wasn't just a procedural matter. It was a direct attack on their representation and voice in local governance. Henyard's reaction, however, wasn't limited to verbal condemnation. She made it clear that she had no intention of accepting the decision quietly. In fiery speeches and media interviews, she announced her intent to pursue legal action against everyone involved in what she called a gross violation of democratic principles. Her promise to sue became a rallying cry, galvanizing her base and amplifying the controversy. Henyard framed her battle as not only a fight for her political survival, but also a crusade against what she claimed was a corrupt system working against the interests of ordinary citizens. Her critics, however, argue that Henyard's removal from the ballot was justified. They point to the technicality cited for her disqualification, her slate's failure to include a certified assessor, as a legitimate reason to exclude her from the race. Supporters of Harris's decision view the caucus as a necessary measure to uphold party rules and restore integrity to the local political process. But Henyard and her backers see the technicality as a flimsy pretext, contending that it was exploited to consolidate power and crush opposition. Henyard's defiance has only fueled her resolve. Positioning herself as a champion of democracy, she has vowed to expose what she calls widespread corruption and electoral malpractice. Her fiery rhetoric and unwavering determination have energized her supporters, who see her as a fearless leader standing against a rigged system. In their eyes, Henyard is not just defending her candidacy. She is fighting for the very principles of fairness and justice. Her speeches, laced with passionate denunciations of her opponents, have kept her at the forefront of the political drama, ensuring that her name remains central to the unfolding election saga. Yet Henyard's actions have deepened the divisions within Thornton Township. Public opinion is sharply split. Her supporters hail her as a victim of political manipulation, arguing that Harris's actions reflect a broader agenda to marginalize her influence and derail her ambitions. Meanwhile, her detractors accuse her of opportunism, claiming she is more focused on self-preservation than addressing the pressing needs of the community. Critics assert that Henyard's legal maneuvers and public outbursts are distractions that risk dragging the township into further turmoil, potentially delaying progress on critical local issues. Despite the mounting criticism, Henyard remains undeterred. She insists that her fight is about more than her own political career. It's about standing up to what she sees as systemic corruption and holding those in power accountable. Her defiance has drawn attention not only to her disqualification, but also to the broader implications of the caucus process. For Henyard, the stakes couldn't be higher. Her political future, reputation, and standing in the community all hang in the balance. As the legal battles she has promised loom on the horizon, the township braces for what could be a prolonged and contentious fight. Henyard's determination to challenge the status quo has transformed this local election into a high-stakes political showdown. The controversy has raised critical questions about fairness, power, and democracy, ensuring that this dramatic chapter in Henyard's career will have lasting implications for Thornton Township politics. Whether Henyard's fiery defiance and legal maneuvers will vindicate her and restore her to the race, or further alienate her critics and deepen the township's divisions, remains to be seen. What is certain, however, is that her reaction to her disqualification has set the stage for a defining moment in local politics. This saga underscores her refusal to fade quietly and her determination to challenge the existing political order, no matter the cost. As the community grapples with the fallout, the themes of power, accountability, and justice loom larger than ever, making this one of the most pivotal and polarizing episodes in Thornton Township's recent history.
Because they can't beat me. If they could beat me, they would have went to the polls. But now when I bring the people out, you don't let them in.
The caucus held at the Homewood-Flossmoor Park District Auditorium devolved into chaos, becoming a flashpoint for allegations of voter suppression and questionable practices that have cast a long shadow over Thornton Township politics. Billed as a pivotal moment for determining the township's political future, the event instead erupted into a divisive spectacle that has only intensified existing tensions. At the heart of this controversy is Tiffany Henyard, the embattled figure who claims the chaos was orchestrated to undermine her candidacy and disenfranchise her supporters. According to Henyard, the problems began even before the caucus officially started. She alleges that hundreds of her supporters, some of whom had traveled long distances and endured freezing temperatures, were barred from entering the building. Many of these individuals, she claims, were elderly community members who had been transported via buses she arranged. Despite their efforts to participate, these attendees were reportedly turned away at the doors after arriving slightly late, leaving them stranded outside while the proceedings unfolded without them. Henyard describes this as a deliberate act of exclusion, particularly pointing to the seniors who were left out in the cold, unable to have their voices heard. Henyard further criticizes the stringent entry restrictions, claiming that even those who managed to reach the venue were subjected to draconian measures. She alleges that attendees were allowed to enter only 2 at a time, a rule she decried as a deliberate attempt to suppress turnout. These limitations, she argues, were part of a broader strategy to manipulate the outcome of the caucus and silence dissenting voices. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere was no less contentious. Henyard's camp describes the meeting as a rushed and tightly controlled affair that lasted a mere 7 minutes. During this time, State Senator Napoleon Harris and his allies quickly nominated themselves to the Democratic ticket and adjourned the proceedings with minimal discussion. Henyard claims this hasty process was designed to eliminate transparency and prevent any meaningful opposition or debate. She paints the event as a sham, accusing Harris and his slate of orchestrating a process that prioritized power over democratic principles. The exclusion of so many supporters from the caucus, Henyard argues, is emblematic of broader voter disenfranchisement and backdoor political dealings. She has framed the event as an outright assault on democratic norms, accusing her opponents of rigging the process to ensure her removal from the race. For Henyard, the image of her supporters, particularly the elderly, left standing outside in freezing temperatures while critical decisions were made behind closed doors, has become a symbol of what she sees as a deeply flawed and undemocratic system. Critics of Henyard have pushed back against her narrative, dismissing her claims as exaggerated and self-serving. They argue that logistical challenges and adherence to procedural rules, rather than malicious intent, were responsible for the issues at the caucus. However, Henyard's account, marked by allegations of disenfranchisement, rushed decisions, and exclusionary tactics, has resonated with many in her community. For her supporters, the chaotic event represents not just a personal affront to Henyard, but a broader attack on the principles of fairness and community representation. The fallout from the caucus has only deepened the already significant political rift within Thornton Township. Public opinion remains sharply divided, with some viewing the event as a necessary step to restore order and compliance with party rules, while others see it as a calculated effort to marginalize Henyard and suppress her base. The controversy has raised serious questions about the integrity of the process and the motivations behind the decision to hold a caucus instead of a primary election. For Henyard and her supporters, the fight is far from over. She has vowed to escalate her battle through legal avenues, arguing that the events at the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium were a gross violation of democratic principles. Her fiery rhetoric and determination to challenge what she sees as systemic corruption have kept her at the center of the township's political discourse. To her critics, this is a last-ditch effort to salvage her political career, but to her supporters, it is a righteous stand against an unfair system. As the community grapples with the aftermath of the chaotic caucus, the incident remains a defining moment in the unfolding political saga of Thornton Township. The stakes have never been higher, with questions of fairness, accountability, and the future of local democracy hanging in the balance. Henyard's allegations and the ensuing public outrage have ensured that this contentious episode will remain a focal point in the township's political landscape for months to come.
Of course. The right way. Illegal.
Supporters of Tiffany Henyard have unleashed a wave of criticism against Napoleon Harris, accusing him of manipulating the recent caucus to further his political ambitions and secure an uncontested path to dominance. Keith Price, a close ally of Henyard, called the event the most flagrant scam he had ever witnessed, alleging that hundreds of eligible participants were unjustly barred from participating. Price argued that this exclusion was no accident, but a calculated effort to suppress Henyard's supporters and ensure Harris's slate triumphed unopposed. This sentiment of disenfranchisement is widely echoed within Henyard's camp, which claims the process was rife with irregularities designed to marginalize dissenting voices. Bolstering their accusations is election lawyer Carrie Kraft Heffer, whose analysis of the caucus uncovered several procedural violations that cast serious doubt on its integrity. Among the issues Heffer highlighted was the apparent failure to collect signed affidavits from participants, a fundamental safeguard intended to verify voter eligibility and ensure the credibility of the election. She also identified other lapses that further undermined the transparency and fairness expected in a democratic process. These revelations have amplified Henyard's camp's allegations, portraying the caucus not just as flawed, but as deliberately structured to suppress opposition. Critics of the event argue that by bypassing critical safeguards, the organizers prioritized consolidating power over upholding democratic principles. The accusations have added fuel to an already intense political firestorm, with Henyard's backers framing the incident as a glaring example of systemic corruption. For many in Henyard's camp, this is more than just an attack on their candidate. It is a broader assault on democratic values. The sense of frustration, anger, and betrayal among her supporters has galvanized a renewed resolve to challenge what they see as a gross subversion of fairness. They argue that the caucus exemplifies how entrenched political interests can manipulate the system to their advantage, leaving ordinary citizens disillusioned and skeptical of the electoral process. Henyard's supporters are calling for accountability and reform, determined to expose what they see as a broken system. To them, this caucus has become a rallying cry for a more equitable and transparent political framework, a fight they insist is vital, not only for their candidate, but for the future of their community's democracy.
People were getting let in at the proper time. We had a caucus, and the people voted for a slate of candidates to represent.
The embattled mayor of Dolton and Thornton Township Supervisor has become the focal point of heated debates following her exclusion from the Democratic ballot in the recent caucus. While Henyard and her supporters have alleged voter suppression and systemic disenfranchisement, critics argue that her accusations may be a calculated effort to deflect attention from her leadership shortcomings and a history of contentious behavior. Opponents assert that Henyard had ample time to prepare her slate for the caucus and ensure compliance with the necessary requirements, such as including a certified assessor. Her failure to meet these standards, they say, reflects poorly on her organizational and leadership capabilities. Following established rules is not voter suppression, said one local resident. Her inability to comply with the process isn't proof of conspiracy, it's proof of negligence. Adding to the skepticism are allegations that Henyard improperly used township resources to support her campaign, including arranging transportation for voters who were ultimately turned away for non-compliance. While Henyard framed the exclusion of her supporters as deliberate suppression, critics argue that the logistical failures were of her own making, undermining her claims of bias. The buses full of seniors were a nice gesture, one detractor commented, but if you don't have a complete and valid slate, none of it matters. The controversy surrounding Henyard's exclusion has also reignited long-standing criticisms of her leadership style and ethical conduct. Accusations of misusing township resources, politically motivated retaliation against opponents, and excessive personal expenditures have plagued her tenure. According to one report, Henyard charged over $30,000 to a village credit card for Amazon purchases in a single day, with additional allegations of spending nearly $100,000 on travel, meals, and other questionable expenses. These actions, her critics claim, have created a significant credibility gap in her narrative of being a victim of systemic injustice. Supporters of Henyard, however, maintain that the caucus was rigged to block her candidacy. Keith Price, a loyal ally, described the event as the most flagrant scam he had ever witnessed, claiming that hundreds of Henyard supporters were unjustly excluded from participating. They argue that Harris and his allies orchestrated the process to sideline Henyard, knowing she remains popular among certain voter groups. Silencing a leader who has done more for this community than anyone else is the goal here, not simply the caucus, Price remarked. Napoleon Harris, the Thornton Township Democratic Committeeman at the center of the controversy, has denied these claims, asserting that the caucus was conducted lawfully and equitably. Harris defended the decision to hold a caucus, pointing out that other Illinois townships frequently use the process. While Thornton Township hasn't held a caucus in decades, it's a common practice elsewhere, Harris explained. He maintained that the rules were followed and the results were legitimate. Despite Harris's assurances, Henyard's legal team is preparing to contest the caucus outcome in court, alleging that the rules were arbitrarily applied and her exclusion was premeditated. Henyard herself has doubled down on her accusations, calling Harris a coward and accusing him of orchestrating a hostile takeover to eliminate her from the race. These fiery public outbursts have further polarized the community, with some residents questioning her ability to lead effectively while adhering to principles of fairness and accountability. For her detractors, the chaos surrounding the caucus is emblematic of deeper issues with Henyard's leadership style. Her tenure as mayor of Dolton has been marked by controversy, including allegations of embezzlement, mismanagement, and political retaliation. Under her leadership, Dolton's finances reportedly fell into a multi-million-dollar deficit. A review of the village's financial position, led by former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, described the situation as severe. According to Lightfoot's initial findings, Dolton's general fund balance plummeted from a surplus of over $5 million to a deficit of approximately $4 million during Henyard's tenure. Lightfoot's investigation also uncovered instances of police officers receiving excessive overtime pay, with one officer earning more than twice their annual salary in overtime alone over 2 years. These revelations, coupled with allegations of Henyard's extravagant spending, have fueled calls for her resignation. She's been called the worst mayor in America for a reason, one critic said. Her administration has been a disaster. Despite these criticisms, Henyard's supporters remain vocal in their belief that her exclusion from the ballot is part of a larger conspiracy to remove her from power. They see her as a champion of the community, fighting against entrenched interests determined to silence her. For these supporters, the controversy surrounding the caucus is not just about procedural missteps. It is a battle for democracy and representation. Whether Henyard's legal challenges and continued public outcry will restore her position on the ballot or further tarnish her reputation remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the fallout from the caucus has deepened divisions within Thornton Township. The episode has become a flashpoint for broader debates about leadership, accountability, and the integrity of the electoral process. As the legal battles unfold, the stakes are higher than ever for Henyard. Her political future, reputation, and standing in the community all hang in the balance. For her critics, the caucus serves as a reckoning for a leader whose actions they believe have undermined trust in local governance. For her supporters, it is a rallying cry to push back against what they see as an unjust and corrupt system. In the end, the controversy surrounding the caucus may have lasting implications for Thornton Township politics. It has not only brought long-standing grievances and divisions to the surface, but also raised critical questions about the balance of power, fairness, and accountability in local government. Whether Henyard emerges from this ordeal as a vindicated leader or a cautionary tale will depend on the outcome of the battles yet to come. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates on this explosive saga